Hello to everyone. Hi and good evening. On behalf of our patrons, Dipti, Dattaraj, and Ishita Salgaonkar, we welcome you to today's discussion as part of our Artist in Residence Lab with Maksud Ali Mondal. As part of our conversation this evening, we are privileged to be joined by Mr. Rajendra Kerkar, esteemed environmentalist whose work has been instrumental in bringing attention to conserving the biodiversity of the Western Ghats and the forested regions bordering Maharashtra and Karnataka. He is on the National Board of Wildlife of India, State Board of Wildlife, Goa State Environment Protection Council, Worldwide Fund for Nature, India. We also have here with us Waylon James D'Souza, artist and designer, whose practice and research addresses regenerative living systems, integrating local ecologies to create sustainable futures. He collates principles of education, philosophy, and culture to emphasize pan-disciplinary experiments in sustainability science. Thank you both for your presence this evening. To introduce very briefly Maksud's project and from where our conversation will begin, it is a site-specific intervention and bio-experiment. For over 2 months, Maksud has inhabited an existing installation. So the original work was here at our space, and it was called Dusra, the other, by an artist called Sanchayan Ghosh. So when Maksud visited us, he was immediately drawn to that space. And at the time, the work was going through its own process of decay and erosion. So he wanted to make this site the heart of his project and restart these concepts or re-look into these concepts of otherness that the artist Sanchayan had started. So as part of his research, what he started to do was he began to visit nearby areas and villages in Goa, and he started to collect natural waste. And with the waste he collected, he started to cover the original Dusra. And over time, we noticed that the site started to become a repository of biological forms and processes. Various microbes like fungi and mushrooms and maggots started to enter and germinate here and turn the space into this sort of dynamic, bustling, and constantly transforming social system. In fact, we witnessed how nature became the protagonist of this work. Nature was the maker of this work. And these invisible agents that were flourishing here, how these tiny, tiny elements were actually determining their own cycles of life and non-life. So this garden that Maksud keeps calling his work has become this place of discovery and reflection and gathering. Before we move on, I invite Maksud to say a few words, followed by Shazeb Shaikh. Shazeb has guided and facilitated Maksud's project over the past 2 months. To introduce Shazeb, he is curator with the focus on experimental practices. Over the last decade and a half, he has been part of building artistic communities and ongoing projects such as the KYTA residency in the Himalayas and Ladakh, the Story of Foundation in Goa, and the Blackout Festival in Mumbai.
Good evening, everyone. So thank you for being here today. And so I will introduce a few things that I started working here since my residency started. So I'm basically interested in generating how the relationship between organisms in between us, including other species, organisms, as well as our place in the current environment. So I'm working this since I was here in the beginning of I started working. So as Leandré said that it was an existing installation made by Sanchayan Ghosh. So I find very interesting things that how the relationship that when we see something that we call awful or something that we think as a disgust or something that we neglect or ignore in daily life. So I saw that entities of becoming Dusra for us. So something that we creating some distance from in between those elements of nature. So I started putting some material for them so that they can germinate there or they can attracted by those material. So when I started looking the surroundings, what kind of materials are available here. So that is also like it's not like some material that I want to introduce a new, or much more it is like something meant to be discarded, you know. So yeah, we can see some processes here that so I find some material that from the rejected, that term like we see as a rejected material. So I use then make blend so that it can be created a whole space, and it's become an ecosystem for now for the entities that are keep growing on the space, and also termites are coming and eating by the day. So this is the main idea of creating a sort of durational interventions into the landscape. That is the main concern of this project. Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Shazeb. I had the chance to work with Maksud on this project since the beginning in terms of being able to assist him, facilitate what he wanted to do, as he comes from another state of India, and while he had some experiences in Goa before. So what I essentially tried to do with in terms of assisting Maksud was connect him to local stories, local materials, also local people. And along the way, even I found a lot of these connections myself, which has been great. So I don't particularly have a practice that is connected to what Maksud is doing, but just with a focus on experimental practices, this also somewhere falls in the same subset. And it's been great to see the experiment sort of happen over the last 2 months. And it's nice to have this conversation now that that part of the work is over, and it has gone into a zone of conversation about the others and a mutual relationship with all the non-human others, whether it's insects or plants or things that sometimes we find disgusting or don't want to see in our houses, but how they also have a big role in the ecosystems that we live in. Yeah, so that's just a bit from me, and we can start the chat along with Rajendra and Waylon.
Maksud, could you tell us how and why nature became the center of your study into concepts of otherness?
Thank you. So nature was always curious for me to see like what is happening. So this is the first questions that I was looking, and what are the relationship in between the culture and nature. So while I was it was curious for me to work with it, and so I started questioning myself what will be the dialogue while I am creating certain space or certain areas, or maybe in terms of fine art that I began with. So I started questioning that what will be the role when I'm talking about nature's aesthetics? What will be the main role of myself that I want to generate? So that question brings me to allow certain phenomena that can be directly inside my work. So something that I always wanted to notice, something that is much more nature as something that is neglected, something like decomposing, rotting, or crack, something that is we don't want to see, that we in terms of modernity, that we always want to erase those activities, but this is very natural phenomena that is happen. So what are the relationship between these? And then I found that these non-human entities is becoming main concern of it, and then I started creating some dialogues between them. So this is how I want to talk about these non-human entities in bringing those living organism in the work. So this is my first insight.
If I can open the same question also to you, Rajendra, in terms of, do you see a definition of what we are kind of discussing today, which is others, which are non-human others, or what has been your sort of introduction to this, and having such a long sort of a career in interacting and engaging with non-human forms?
I am born and brought up in the area of the Western Ghat, and I live in the foothill where two rivers surround my house. So I was familiar much with the non-human entities since my childhood. Living in such a pristine environment and ecology, I developed the love for the nature. And that is the thing which is responsible for me when I realize that threats are looming over the mountains. Threats are looming over the natural flowing river. When I saw that wild animals are killed, poaching is going on. So all this was responsible for developing in me the love for non-human things. Here when I saw the exhibitions, I got realization of the mother goddess worshipped in my area. People in Goa and Konkan worship a typical form of goddess. They call it Earth Mother Goddess. And what is the role of this Earth Mother Goddess? If you see the exhibition installed by Maksud, it is nothing but the creation of the mother. The mother digests. Mother gives us so many things. And when I saw the folk dance called Dhalo, Dhalo is a typical folk festival of Goa. And already in the last month, most of the villages in Goa celebrated this festival. In this festival, you will get the opportunity to learn how people love the Mother Earth. And you know, massive leaf litter, which is there, would have caused a lot of problem to us. But ants, termites are responsible for transforming all this into the clay. माती कहे कुमार से तू क्यों रोंधे मोहे एक दिन ऐसा आवेगा मैं रोंधूंगी तो. So this is eternal truth you can understand through the mother nature, and that is the role played by the fungi. People in our land believes that fungi are living being, and that is why they worship ant hill as a goddess, because they know that if you protect the ant hill, you are offering protection to the termite, you are offering protection to the water bodies. You know, the water is the elixir of life. So if you protect the ant hill, if you protect all these things, then life is enjoyable, life is happy. So when taking birth in such a beautiful area, in the lap of the Mahadev Wildlife Sanctuary, since last more than 5 decades, I am living in that village. I was born and brought up in a urban area called Bicholim, and from there my family then shifted to this area in Sattari Taluka. You all people are getting water because of the pristine forests which are there, and I protected for all this and suffered a lot. So that is the reason, you know, when you live in an atmosphere, this atmosphere is responsible for shaping your personality and your whole life and livelihood.
Thank you. So on one hand, we see Maksud's sort of engagement with the subject more from, let's say, a space of fascination, and while Rajendra comes from also a space of that connection, but also protection. How about you, Waylon, in terms of your connection to nature and non-human others, and also, you know, like what's your particular focus in the way that you are engaging with them?
In my case, I had like these two extremes where it was being brought up in the city, like Bombay, which is hyper urban, and then also I was flitting back and forth with family which was from relatively pristine, untouched places, and I would see this as when you mentioned about people finding it icky, like the whole, when urban people see like termites or ants or lizards crawling around, they want to get rid of it, or if it's leaf litter, which, so I saw that aspect happening, and I was always, engaging with the creepy crawlies, even in the city. And when I would see, like, the more untouched places, I would see like everything in a kind of a cyclical nature, where you would see the termites, cycling like through, like termites do have fungi in their systems, and fungi are like the interface organisms between life and death. Right. So looking at those aspects, that kind of helped me to see the ether between like these two opposing factors, where like you see some minds trying to protect what is you could say the old world, and like people with, you could say, an urban Indo-colonial education want to develop, and we've had decades of that. So, and there's an imbalance which has happened, and now people are realizing the repercussions of it. So, for me, like observing these cycles, and at some point of time I was an industrial designer, also part of the capitalistic system. And then I saw this other side, and I wanted to see how both could merge at a center point. So most of my learnings and yearning to also understand these things came from understanding that whole spectrum, and trying to bridge both of these worlds together. If that roughly answers the question.
Yeah. About the relationship with the mother goddess, especially here in Goa, would you say that at least here in Goa, there is still this closeness to nature, or with the present sort of migration or flux of people that are coming here in the hope to sort of relive a different kind of relationship with nature? Would you say that this is changing too quickly, and what can we do to sort of retain this closeness?
Yeah, what I have noticed that with the influx of the people coming from the globe, a lot of changes are taking place. The faith which was responsible for keeping the people intact with the natural entities. Today, one can see that the devrites, the sacred groves, are cleared for the sort of establishing the housing complexes. In this area, there was a sacred place called Sat Bhindinichi Rai. It was a sacred place where, 7 Garcinia indica trees were worshipped. The Garcinia indica is just like the Amrut Kokam. It is the seed of this fruit or bhinda gives you oil, that is cholesterol free oil. But today, if you see, not a single tree here is protected in this area. Just few meter away from this is a Mala where the Sat Bhindinichi Rai was there. The same case in wherever urban settlements are there. For example, if you go to Bardesh, Shivoli is a place where the name of the place is Raivada. Raivada means the place where once upon a time the sacred groves were there. And if you visit the shrine of Dardev, once upon a time it was full with the different type of the indigenous trees. But today the cement concrete encroachment is going on such an alarming rate. I am very much afraid of all these things. Whereas in my area, I was telling to Maksud that what you have exhibited here, we are experiencing it every day. You have the vision of looking best into the west. So, my world is of the forest, that is of jungle, water that is of jal, and of the soil that is of the jamin, jal, jungle, jamin. And I love all these three and I connect this to the Jivan. If we want to enrich our life, our existence in absence of all this, the people from various corners are coming to my land. The attraction is very soothing environment. When they look at the त्या दिसा वडाकडीन गडद तिनसाना मंद मंद वाजत आयली तुझी गो पायजण. The banyan tree which was responsible for inspiring B.B. Borkar to pen the poem on the Ficus bengalensis. This is my land. Now in this environment you can hear the twittering of the coppersmith, the bird on this nearby coconut tree, the bird is there. So if we want our life to be mirthful, cheerful, then keeping all this is very important. It is changing very fast, but you know, coconut tree offering the shelter to the koyal, to the tambird, all these birds makes our life melodious.
Waylon, you have, in your practice, you do bring in these living entities into the institutional space. And on one hand, this does allow for a more expanded aesthetic approach. And it also enables a deeper investigation into different life forms into the sphere of artistic practice. Are you seeing, or are we sort of witnessing more artists who are working beyond the canvas today and in nature?
Yeah, I've seen it happen in various departments where people are trying to look out of that silos or house blinders of typically applying, whether it's the arts, the design, and science sectors. So I think there just needs to be more engagement between these different sectors. Like as we were talking earlier, when it comes to development, you know, it's nothing new which I'm practicing. It's been done in various parts of the globes and various indigenous people over time. I'm just doing it in a different format for new, like as I said earlier, synergy between contemporary development. I also feel that to get the leeway to also execute that, one has to socially re-engineer people to rethink what they demand, whether it could be in the form of an artwork or experiences, events, their own home in terms of real estate, when citizens of a state or country demand for infrastructure, sometimes they don't know exactly what they want. They only see the end product. Like, when you say, if you look at the Western Ghats, as you mentioned, many people in the city are oblivious to the fact that that water has been dammed for their constant use, whether it is housing or whether it's industrial production of goods and flitted around the world. So it then if they kind of have a larger understanding of how these systems work, they would know how to even encourage or engage with artists who are trying to express or in some way create change, whether through awareness or solutions, and a whole spectrum of other people too.
So how can we encourage these more conscious ways of development? Can we, do you think, and Mr. Kerkar also, do you think there are possibilities for different practitioners to come together and work together, like artists, environmentalists, scientists, architects, farmers, and how can we nurture those collaborations?
I feel, in terms of when I interacted with a lot of people too, when it came to scientists, there were lots of them which would reply back that we are caught up with writing 7 research papers and etc., and we can't really understand this, but it sounds interesting. We would like to engage, but we're busy with papers. And what happens with all this, all these academic papers? They just get circulated among a few, and then they get shelved. And similarly, if you look at governance and urban planning, then again it's another silos. So it would be great to have a forum of sort which is on demand by the larger public, that people come together and educationists come together, schools, colleges, various institutes, whether it could be colleges or even departments like ICAR, Indian Council of Agricultural Research, because in typical agriculture also I see that they're looking at monoculture in terms of, and I see there also that, even they have like organic products to deal with pests or kill them off, while coming back to termites and fungi, like if one could design spaces where instead of you having to deal with all your leaf litter from a city, which gets either swept away, put in one rickshaw, is taken to another dump. If you decentralize systems and you kind of have a termite farm, for example, which so that they don't attack your timber, but you're like literally feeding them, So if everyone could get on the table and design cities in that format, and various artists, everyone can dream. It's not just like artists, but decision makers, policy makers should be at the table where we can engage over long spans of time, and it'll be a continuous process, and yeah.
Yeah, since last more than 3 decades, I am involved in bringing the various stakeholders together, convincing them what is important. For example, as far as the identity of Goa is concerned, we always say that Hurrak and Feni is the identity of Goa, and we love to promote the Kaju. But if you look at the Western Ghat, the poor Western Ghat, the poor tigers, the sloth bear, the bisons, all these unhumans do not have the enough space. The Kaju plantation is increasing day by day. Government is promoting. The society also want this cash crop. But when I started interacting with the people, I was telling them what you people were growing in this area. They were telling me, we were growing the finger millet, nasnik, wari, kango, ralo. Now, there is no market for all this place, all this food grain. So when I started telling to the people that these are not the coarse food grain, this has been the words used by most of the scholars, that all this is a coarse food grain, not to be eaten by the human being. But if you look at the minerals, vitamins provided by all these finger millets and all this type of the millets, people are loving now to eat all these millets. So we started reviving, we started talking with the people, explaining them what is important for you. I am not telling them now uproot all the Kaju plants. Keep wherever Kaju plantation is there, but you should grow the Kaju plantation not in the forested area, but in the areas where the isolated, neglected mines are there. There you can do this. And people have taken all this what I was telling to them, to the heart, and doing the transformation. As far as the chemical colors were concerned, I was always telling the people for last more than a quarter century that these are hazardous. So then we provided alternative for the people that natures give you the color. For example, if you come to my area during these days, it is full with the flowers of Butia monosperma. Butia monosperma or the palash, for example, palash ke full. So if you collect these flowers and put them into the water, boil them and drink, it will give you a relief from so many ailments. If you want color for shira, or if you want color for preparing any food item, you can use this color. And this is possible. Our people, since ages, were using kurkurma longa, that is a turmeric. It is antiseptic, you know. Visva-Bharati marketed it. Why you people using all these things for fish curry rice? I was asking them, and then they were telling, no, you know, there are some things which are there in the fishes which are harmful for human being. Because of adding of the turmeric, we are getting a very nice dish. So if you speak with the people, if you provide them alternative, it is possible. So we are getting response, we are connecting the people, we are connecting the school children, we are connecting the colleges and receiving good response. So this is possible.
I think, this is very interesting that we started speaking about the uselessness of something, you know, that if we have enough knowledge of like how to use it, I mean that you just said about the Butia monosperma, polus, that if we don't know about how to use this polus flower and we can consume it, I mean, then we can find a way of use it. But that way, that also that leaf, we call leaf litter to clean it. So if we know that this is make our soil is much more fertile, or it's creating some lots of creature condition that is beneficial for us. So then we can understand about that whether it is beneficial or not. I mean, this discourse always there in the conversation when we talk about something useless or useful, yeah, in that way. Yeah.
Yeah, useless or useful, it is all depend upon the experiences. The people since ages are using all these things like the Butia monosperma or protecting anthill inside the sacred group. People were aware that the termites are playing important role. They are forecasting about the approaching rain. They are coming in the house. We are closing the windows. And they are entering the house and telling us now it is the time of the monsoon. So people during the past were aware about all these things. So today our life is confined with the modern things in a such a way that we started losing this connect. So any flowers, mostly like Butia monosperma or any flowers which are there in our surrounding, we should know the uses of it, we should know utility of it. Otherwise, there are chances that Nux vomica, for example, or what we call as a Kazro, name many villages in Goa are named after Kazro, Karapur, Carmona. All these are connected with the Nux vomica. It is a, you know, the if you look at the fruits, it appears very attractive. And if you eat it, then you will start vomiting. So if you discuss with the local, discuss with the scientists, discuss with the botanists, this is possible.
So just a question on about that specifically, that the knowledge of things, and Maksud also what you're talking about in terms of the utility of things, or not of things, of let's say organic material. But where do we get to learn about all these things? Let's say from a systemic perspective, we have some amount that we study in school about it. But when it comes to local knowledge and information, because things tend to, of course, be very different than what you find in Goa and what you find in Bombay. So one question I have is that to make that knowledge visible to people, should there be also more work that should be done in terms of cataloging and in terms of, like archiving some of this thing to the local population? Because I think this is something that I've been seeing as almost like a little global phenomena that is happening about indigenous universities and using those kind of models to be able to research and study what's around you and just store that as information first of all, and then once that information is there, then people can also know, instead of just having this sort of a mindset that okay, it's termite, it's not good for me in the house and so on, and just move away from that. But termite is still something that's like an insect. But let's say when it comes to plants and knowledge about what the same knowledge that was there back in the day in terms of how Ayurveda and all of that maybe came from, but today we don't have that because it's been lost to also the change in how human lifestyle has become. So does the cataloging of some of these things, is that one medium in which we can actually make this connection between, let's say, the public and these other worlds?
And also harnessing that information or knowledge, as part of the identity of a place.
Yeah.
This is how rich it is. This is how diverse it is, and how to encourage that, and as a matter of pride and belonging, that this is what the place possesses.
Yeah, already I have written one book, The Sacred Groves of Goa. It contains all this information about the sacred groves of Goa, why people are using a particular tree or a part of it, and which part is edible, which part has a value as far as the medicine is concerned. So this book is published by Goa State Biodiversity Board of Goa government. So it provides you all information about the sacred groves and what is available in the sacred groves, how they are diverse. And also jointly we came up with a very big book which has the cataloging, which has a documentation of what are the tradable bioresources in Goa. So if you purchase that one book, it is enough for you to understand how people, a small patch of land with 3,702 square kilometer area, so diverse, so wonderful, attracting people since ages. What is the reason? So if you read this book, that will help you to understand how people connected themselves to the nature, and how, for example, if you visit Kotigaon, the biggest village of Goa, 11,111 hectare area in the Western Ghat in Cancun, there each house you will find people making use of different types of the medicinal herbs, root, stems. And when people were suffering from this COVID, corona problem, how these people were protecting themselves is a wonderful. So we have made the attempts to document and catalog all this information in these two important books.
Yeah, so as Rajendra mentioned, like it's already been done over time, but I feel the issue is like, which I've mentioned to a lot of people as a reference, the documentary Schooling the World. It speaks about how, again, urban Indo-colonial education doesn't give you the space to engage with such content which is already out there. So ideally there should be probably like half of the day with typical contemporary education, you could call it, and maybe half of the day, whether it could be students or it could be any age groups, it could be even companies, firms, institutes which dedicate a formal amount of time for reconnecting with such things, where even an urban bumpkin, instead of popping a pill, can, okay, like this is where I could go to the market, if not harvest it from the tree and then make this concoction for myself to increase my immunity or tackle this particular ailment. And that's how they could connect more with, you could say, literally the soil, and for their own benefit and for their the reason why they're shifting to such pristine places too.
In fact, last year we had a conversation with an architect originally from Goa, who's now working in a university as a professor in the States. And he was telling us about his practice that is basically specializing in rewilding cities. So there is this sort of trend it's become, where a lot of people, I suppose, in urban spaces are looking to sort of return to nature, and this is the only way. So here in Goa, we have, it's still a luxury, and at least in a lot of us still live in villages, so we're still feeling that we're still quite close, and there is this proximity in nature. So how do we begin this process of unlearning and reversing this human-nature relationship in the way that we're not rewilding like a trendy thing, but where we are truly dependent on nature?
So, like in this case too, like as you mentioned, it's become quite the trend, and I've noticed when it comes to a lot of people shifting out here, and on some of the projects which I work, it is kind of rewilding where we're transplanting huge trees to like using native flora and fauna, and the end client, comes in there and says, oh, I want a pool deck, and erases all of that out, and they want palms because they've been kind of educated by regular media, whether it is the typical architecture magazines and all that stuff, to have it in that sterilized, manicured, minimalistic look, and they want a quick effect. So they're not waiting for a tree to grow that large over time. They want to walk into a place which is superficially green, and I feel that this unlearning which you mentioned, when we come across these subjects and understand them to whatever of our capacity, we need to also engage and translate it to these other segments so everyone can get together. I've seen it's a trickle-down process where effect, like a butterfly effect, where then you'll see a local who has a mud house, who's living in harmony with nature, has trees growing on their land, and their remuneration which they get, because literally their land is giving out clean air and like clean water. If you see like the whole state is like a water purification system, where it's giving us clean water. And then when you see that is not valued as a tangible, how do you say it, tangible, like literally we should be paying them taxes, and like, so that it's an incentive to have trees on your land and not sell it off. And then when it comes to the aspect of social image and aspirations, then they look at those people who have probably created a huge glass and concrete house, and they have 4 cars and a swimming pool. They're like, to show face, we should somehow hopefully reach there, if not educate our kids to reach there. And in the process, it's like, okay, now that we have some money, let's clear out all the wild grass and native vegetation and tile it up to the boundary wall, let's use stainless steel, let's put POP false ceilings in our houses and LED lights, so that to even show that we are, you know, like as in elevated from that class which is looked at as, you know, poor, you know, for the example. So, so it's a very nuanced thing where you can't really put things in black and white. So for example, like, you know, the amount of pesticides which leach into the soil because of typical agriculture also, like, you know, for example, even in regular government, you could say agricultural distributors, they're selling them the chemical fertilizers, and a lot of the locals also say, oh, we are using Dawai for like this or this, and it's actually DDT, which is literally getting to all of us in various amounts every day. Food is coming from Karnataka. Apparently they have separate fields for Goa and for themselves, so that they can douse the produce which is going elsewhere and not worry about tending to it. And for example, people want, like, this whole thing of sterilizing and having it clean. Like, no one wants to see, when you go to a spring or waterfall, you see certain portions which have algae and moss and muck in certain areas. And we're taught to see, even in terms of good architecture, clean lines, pristine blue pools, decks where everything is in place, and that costs a lot on the environment and eventually ourselves. So like, they have copper sulfate which they throw in there to keep it pristine blue and clear, which then leaches out into all our riverways and waterways, which kills off all invertebrates, which means all your prawns and all your other crustaceans. So when I was doing a biodiversity report, and I was talking to a lot of villagers, and they were like, 2 decades back we would catch fish this large and crabs this large, and now we can't find anything. There's a sewage treatment plant which they put in there, and they're literally not treating the sewage, they're just letting it out into the systems. So if you go to see, like, you know, you have people from elsewhere coming here to have a large grilled fish, and like, oh, Goa's great for grilled fish and fresh seafood, but they had it all along in their backyards, you know, and we've literally like slit the golden goose's neck, you know, or continuing to do it to all the gooses around, you know. So yeah.
I have actually a point that's sort of lateral when we're talking about something like the pandemic that you know, we are still sort of living through. And while one of the solutions that I guess everybody sitting over here has probably gotten is the vaccine, which is you know, something that is, let's say, a pharma product. But at the same time, whenever, like, you know, some of this information that goes around on WhatsApp that we don't want to always believe, which is that you can also have, you know, like this plant, or you can also try some of these other things even if you have COVID, or if you have, you know, like anything like that. But that is also rubbished by a lot of people, you know, also like us in sometimes, that okay, now the whole thing about let's say like cow urine and things like that is also one way of looking that is also a natural product that's coming from a natural source, that some people are also talking about that can also heal you. But then but because it is like an organic thing, some people then have the reaction that, you know, this is not going to really work, because we all, or at least the urban people, have begun to depend a lot more on allopathic things rather than believing that nature has those solutions for you. And so then there's the dichotomy in the people who need to believe it only, that, you know, that sometimes the starting point becomes that I don't want to believe this because this is like coming from nature, or it doesn't have, you know, like maybe the idea of a medicine that is meant to be chemical and that is actually going to treat me. So, Maksud, do you have any?
So, like while we are talking about this kind of situation that we are in the current environment, and also when we are talking about that rewilding or something like that, so what are the, like, why we are talking about this here today? I mean, why it is important to talk about? Because we know that it is, we created like lots of distance between these areas in between us. There is no such environment that we are in. We don't know the soil of the garden that we are, every day we are entering to the garden. We don't know what is there. So we are just bringing them anything. And so I just want to share a story on particular this, questions that in Santiniketan, West Bengal, where I live, there is a Santal community. So one day I experienced that they started gathering food, in the early morning. Then I asked what you are gathering. They are saying there is wild potatoes. So they are finding some potatoes here and there, and they are children's. So I asked what kind of potatoes it is. They said, I don't know the name, but we know that this is edible. We can eat it. So this is the knowledge preservation also, like how we live into the nature, not. So why we are bothered about today to preserve something? Because we know that we are losing something, and they are living inside that, knowledge system. So this is something that I want to talk about. That we are creating that. I already mentioned that what is the relationship between these areas that we are in the moment. I mean, this is we have to think about. Yeah.
Mr. Kerkar, would you like to add to that?
In Goa also, the same experience you can see in the tribal belt of the Cancun. So during the month of Bhadrapad, when Ganesh Chaturthi is celebrated, so 10 days there is a festival called Kodua Parab, wherein the tribal person will visit the sacred grove and will bring all whatever available there, tuber, leaves, and then everything will be sorted out, and it is distributed among all the villagers. And early in the morning they will take this decoction of all this, and they have the strong belief that this will going to help them in curing many problems. The same as far as the wild tubers are concerned. There are, cultivated tubers were earlier wild. So afterward, human beings started cultivating them, and they became the domesticated. So in the same way, we have many wild species. Today the rice which we all are eating, actually it was available in the wild. So then it was domesticated, and in the areas like Goa, you can see Korgood is there, Asgo is there, Babri. All these varieties not only provides you nutrition, but they were relieving the people from many agonies, and that is why the Christian community in this Zuari belt celebrate Pejeche fest. So people have the strong belief that this pest, the rice gruel, will going to relieve them and provide them not only nutrition but also medicinal value.
The poet Ben Okri has written that we are facing one of the biggest crises, and he has been calling for a new philosophy for this terminal moment in the history of the human. And he said that we can no longer continue to be the humans that we have been, and we have to be today the most creative that we have ever been, and that artists must dedicate their lives to redreaming society. What could this redreaming be, and how do we how do we start, and from where do we start, at both maybe an individual level and then on a wider scale?
Yeah, as you mentioned earlier, like about, the extremes of allopathy to like naturopathy. I think it's best we take from the best of all worlds and reimagining this future or even acting on the present. Say, for example, there's certain things, breakthroughs in allopathy, which have brought a lot onto the table. And then once those systems get stagnant, it becomes corrupt, where, I mean, in a way, like if you look at the pandemic, it's great business for manufacturing of healthcare systems, you know, and India's churning out so many medical colleges and medical students. It means more jobs, you know, so that they can earn more to have health care for themselves and their family, which invariably with their lifestyle will develop those symptoms. And like it's, you know, in all fields, even if you see in Ayurveda, there's various brands and outlets where sometimes it's been abused, you know. So when it comes to like cow's urine, for example, in my limited knowledge, I wouldn't be able to comment on that. But what I could say is like the product, if it's free-range cows, which Ayurveda professes in terms of like ghee as medicated substance, it's like when they eat all those different herbs and that biomolecular energy and minerals get into the milk and into the when you make ghee. Yeah, I agree. So and maybe the urine too, you know, and the cow dung. But if it's factory farmed cows like what they have in the US and other first world countries, and if we bring those systems of production and efficiency out here, then I don't think that urine is going to do us any good, the cow's urine. And coming back to the larger picture of reimagining more regenerative and resilient futures, I think we can take the best of both worlds. And everyone focuses on tech currently, whether it's in more spaces, but I think we really need to bring to the table indigenous knowledge on a more formal level. Like there literally should be a couple of hours in school with these subjects, you know, not just as auxiliary options, which like they are painstakingly documenting and putting out on the table. It should be mandatory, I feel, as a start, you know.
Rajendra, for this matter, have you had, you know, also the experiences of kind of some of this information and knowledge going into the mainstream, well, let's say into the educational systems and so on? And have you also been part of any of such transitions where, you know, information that has been brought from nature and actually been applied to mass education systems?
Yes, since last few years I am associated with the Goa board. So greening of the textbooks we have done. For the 5th standard, we have done right from 5th to 10th standard. If you look at the books of textbooks of Goa board, lot of matter is infused with the curriculum. So suppose a poem is there on a banyan tree. So connecting, we have provided training to the teacher how they can connect the student with the local banyan tree. So like that we have done. And if you look at the fish curry rice edited by Dr. Cloud Alvarez, in that I have made a contribution as far as rivers of Goa are concerned, sacred forests are concerned. So all this now are in a curriculum of college level for first year, second year. The students are making use of this knowledge. And also there are PhDs in Goa University, in Pune University, going on whatever knowledge I have shared today. So it is becoming the part of the curriculum, and many people are accepting. For example, if you visit a village called Neturli in Sange Taluka, we have the best example of Chinmay Tansikar, how he is producing organic food there in a small isolated forested village. We have the example of Dande in Taligaon, who given solution to the urban people how they can in their little space can transform into green world. We have the example in the form of Chaitanya Malik. With the help of the Gir cow, he has done the transformation. Now we have with the ICR, working with the ICR, we identified the state cow of Goa, Shweta Kapila. Earlier the people were totally forgotten because all these animals became the stray cattle. So now people are realizing the milk of the Shweta Kapila is nutritious and fit for their children because this cow lives in this environment. So efforts are going on, and I am connected right from Cancun to Pernim. I moves always for a discussion. Today I was in Maharashtra, but I came all the way running here because I have given the word. So I love to be part of the system, even government in power or in opposition. I always interact with them, tells them if you protect this, then only we will going to get the water. So this type of the things I am connected, and I love to be connected.
Thank you.
All right. On that note, I want to thank all of you for coming and spending this evening with us. Thank you, Mr. Kerkar and Waylon, for such wonderful and enriching discussion. Thank you all. We look forward to seeing you soon at Sunaparanta, and wish you a good evening.